Hello and welcome to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope you're doing well. Today I bring you tactical analysis on Crystal Palace 3, Arsenal 0, and they don't get much tougher than this. But nevertheless, we'll be covering everything, breaking it all down. And if you do go on to enjoy today's video, a like would be super appreciated. And if you're new around here, why not consider subscribing, as it massively helps me out. But what will we be covering in today's video? First things first, some quick thoughts on the lineup and subs, followed by a breakdown on stats and tactics. Then we'll be having a little look at the game in a bit more detail, breaking it down goal by goal, system by system, a breakdown of key players, and then to finish up, a few shout outs for those of you who did comment with your predictions on the preview video. But let's waste no more time at all and jump straight into things. So the lineup, definitely a few surprises in there. I didn't think Aaron Ramsdale would feature. The way Arteta was speaking in his press conference, I had the feeling that Leno would start and we'd see Aaron Ramsdale in the Brighton game. But if your best players are fit and available, you have to throw them in. He looked okay, didn't seem too stressed or any problems in that sort of pelvic region. Another big surprise was Tavares at left back, a false change, unfortunately, with Kieran Tierney now out for the remainder of this season with what is a significant knee injury, and he is going to be a big loss to this Arsenal side. And that was very evident during the Palace game. Cedric on the right-hand side, not necessarily a surprise, but there were murmurs that Tomiyasu may be fit and available for the first time in a while. Unfortunately, it now does look like it's more like the Southampton game that Tomiyasu will return. And then it's anyone's guess as to who might feature on that left wing side. Will it be Smith Rowe? Will it be Martinelli? We're constantly seeing them interchange, which is good. Arteta needs those headaches. Quality players, at least two in every position, is what Arsenal need in seasons to come. Looking at the substitutions, some good changes made by Arteta. Tavares had a horrible game, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, coming off at half-time. No need to wait. Two bad performances from him in a row now. Obviously, the other one in the FA Cup game against Nottingham Forest. Arteta needs to get his arm around him, give him some confidence with Tierney out for the rest of the season. He's going to be playing left-back more than likely, unless Cedric plays there and Tomiyasu plays on the other side. But I like the fact that Arteta made this change at half-time and didn't wait for things to get too much worse. Another attacking change with Nketiah coming on with around 25 minutes to go for Cedric. And then, unfortunately, another sort of false change with Thomas Partey coming off with what looks like a reoccurring injury in that thigh, something that he suffered with in the early parts of his Arsenal career. Fingers crossed that it's nothing too serious and that he only misses maybe one game upcoming against Brighton. But let me know your thoughts. Were you happy with the lineup? Would you have done the same with the changes? Let me know down in the comments below. Looking at the statistics and tactics implemented, one thing that did surprise me straight away was Arsenal's possession at 69%. Yes, Palace did dominate, I would say, in that first 30 minutes where they did go 2-0 up. But after that, yes, Arsenal did come into the game slightly and did dominate more in that second half. But I thought it might have been a little bit more equal. Arsenal racking up around 12 shots as well. There have been games, consecutive games, where Arsenal were racking up between 18 and 20 shots. So a little lower than we're used to. But we can see here via the heat map, Arsenal very much looking to expose some weaknesses out wide against Palace. Nathaniel Klein, for example, age isn't on his side, but he seems to have done a very, very good job, especially in that second half, having both Smith Rowe and Martinelli on that left-hand side. They were interchanging throughout that second half, but unable to break them down. And we even saw Saka switch to that left-hand side at one stage as well. But it very much seems as though, from Arteta's point of view, that we were looking to target Palace out wide, as we have done in many games in the past. And if we have a look at the passing shape of Arsenal here as well, Tavares, number 20, isn't as further forward as we would normally see a Kieran Tierney, for example. And both our fullbacks, the other being Cedric, were quite narrow. Thomas Partey playing that typical role as number 5 there, just in front of the back 4. And there was more of a front 3, quite narrow. Normally we see Saka quite high and wide, but very, very narrow from Arsenal for a change. And that was matched quite nicely by Crystal Palace with Zaha and AU coming in narrow as well, not allowing Arsenal to play out from the back. If we have a little look here at the goals, well, the first two at least. I don't think we need to look too much into the VAR decision to give Palace a penalty, the tackle or foul, if you will, from Martin Odegaard. I think that one's a little bit more clear-cut, but these we can analyse in a little bit more detail. Picture number 1 here, we can see the ball has been flighted in from a free kick from Conor Gallagher. Gabriel just missing the ball with his header. You can see there highlighted in the smaller of the 2 yellow circles here. Unfortunately, his positioning and the way he sort of squared up to this free kick didn't allow him to get to the ball in the way he normally does. He's very good at winning headers. Unfortunately, as I said, positioning all wrong on this occasion. But what was more concerning was the fact that Tavares, you can see here in the bigger yellow circle, doesn't even jump or even try to challenge for this header at all, allowing the Palace player to get that header in at the back post. And another big concern for me, you can see that here, the yellow arrow is the flight of the ball after the header is won. And you've got 1, 2, 3 Arsenal players all watching the ball and not watching these 2 Palace players in the box, which is where the ball eventually ends up, as we can see here in picture number 2, leaving Aaron Ramsdale in no man's land. And as well, you guys know who have watched the game, the ball ends up in the back of the net. So much, much better in terms of, or should I say, what needs to be better is that positioning and focus there at the back, which is something Arsenal have been quite good at this season. Having a look at picture number 3, this is the beginning of the second goal. This come from the left-hand side. I believe it was a throw-in. The ball eventually ends up here inside the Palace own half, quite deep from Anderson. And the big concern for me here is that their centre-back is able to play what is a 30-yard pass, which completely splits Arsenal's back line open. Now, if you look at it here, you would say that Tavares is in a fairly good position. Gabriel, Ben White, the back 4 there in a really, really good position. But unfortunately, I just don't think Tavares and Gabriel were in sync, and Gabriel just didn't trust Tavares, unfortunately. And we can see here in picture number 4, Gabriel dives in to try and win the ball early, leaving Tavares in no man's land. He's quite square. And, well, AU is allowing the momentum of the direction he's already moving in to take him into the edge of the box, and he eventually scores. And we can see here that, well, Ben White can't really do much as he's already marking another Crystal Palace player. So a lot to be desired from a defensive aspect for these 2 goals. But if we have a little look at the shape of both clubs, how did Palace eventually break Arsenal down? How did they stop Arsenal from playing? We can see here in picture number 1, Arsenal adopting their typical shape here at the back, with Thomas Partey playing as the single pivot. We can just about see Granit Xhaka in the top part of this picture, and just off screen in this particular area is where Martin Odegaard would typically tend to situate himself. But what Palace done really, really well is Tavares, we can see here, and Cedric playing very narrow for a change. Typically, Arsenal like to play wide in that sense and allow Martin Odegaard and Granit Xhaka to be a little bit more narrow. But because of that, Zaha and AU were able to come in and close the space down between Tavares and Xhaka. And then Zaha on this side would have been Cedric and then Odegaard up here. And then between Mateta and Gallagher, they were able to block out these passes into that pivot of Partey. So they were in a really, really good shape. They lined up out of possession when pressing quite high in what looked like a 4-2-3-1. And their 2 central midfield players were both defensively minded players, which were allowing Crystal Palace to cancel out any movement in those half spaces from Granit Xhaka and Martin Odegaard. If we have a look at picture number 2 here, very similar to when Kieran Tierney plays, very similar to when Arteta first took over. We've got that typical shape there with 4 at the back. Granit Xhaka this time jumping in at left back, going back to what I just said when Arteta first took over, still keeping that diamond in midfield. But what we are seeing here is this is where we would typically see Granit Xhaka, but on this occasion, the space is being occupied by Emil Smith-Rowe and Tavares playing high and wide, which is the role that Kieran Tierney plays very, very well. And respect Tavares, at the start of the season when he played well, this was the role that he was playing also. Obviously, a game to forget. But looking at Crystal Palace, playing with a good low block with 4 men in midfield, 4 at the back, 2 up top. So they were playing a 4-4-2 when deeper out of possession. And this allowed them, very similar to what Arsenal do, to counter-attack Arsenal very, very well. But as mentioned here, we've got the 2 central midfield players, 2 very defensively minded central midfield players, and they weren't allowing Arsenal with Emile Smith-Rowe or Xhaka when he was in there, or Martin Odegaard to play in those spaces. Picture number 3 highlights Arsenal in attack. Some of the things that we've begun to see week in, week out. We've got the 4 yellow circles here, and then off camera, or off picture, should I say, a little further to the left-hand side is where Smith-Rowe is. So we've got those 5 players in attack, but Crystal Palace very, very good again in that low block with their 4 players there. And if we have a look at the amount of space that these 3 players here for Arsenal have, pretty much nothing, with their 2 defensive central midfield players not allowing Arsenal any space in that central part, and Gallagher effectively man-marking Thomas Partey, who has in recent weeks been more of a anchor for Arsenal, starting those plays, and then Granit Xhaka in the left-back position. What Arsenal could have done to counter this is Lacazette could have pulled out to the right-hand side or the left-hand side to create overloads, pulling out maybe a Crystal Palace centre-back or even a central midfield player, allowing space for others. For whatever reason, Arsenal didn't do this, but it was certainly an area that I would have targeted in this game. And then picture number 4, just to highlight Arsenal. Again, these 2 pictures here, 3 and 4, even though they're different teams, very, very similar. Arsenal set up in their typical 4-4-2, that low block with Odegaard and Lacazette providing the pressure, which is very, very good, this particular system, when counter-attacking. And it's something that Crystal Palace done very, very well on the day. Here we have what I would typically call key players, but you can see on screen now that the word key has been crossed out. And these were 3 players that I did want to talk about in today's video. Normally, we're praising players in this section. This channel and videos, it's not about bashing players. That's not what it's all about. But I just do want to have a very quick conversation about these 3. There were other poor performances on the night, don't get me wrong. Nuno Tavares, as already mentioned, definitely had a night to forget. Heat map suggests very much situated on the left-hand side. No surprises there. Typically, you do tend to see him in a more advanced position, but Crystal Palace clearly took advantage of that. A player with not many minutes in the legs either, not very match fit. Passing, not necessarily bad. 79% isn't terrible, but only 1 tackle and 1 interception and 2 duels, 1 out of 4. Definitely not good numbers. As I already mentioned, Arteta really is going to need to get his arm around Tavares in training, because it looks like long-term, for at least until the end of this season, he is the naturally left-sided player, and we did see some good games from him earlier in this season. So fingers crossed, Arteta with a bit of faith can just get him to a decent standard. Martin Odegaard came into some criticism as well after the game, because some have suggested that he went missing, and when he isn't allowed the extra second or 2 on the ball, he doesn't necessarily operate to the level that we have seen him operate at against some of the other teams that we've played since Christmas. Again, passing-wise, 77%. He had 3 shots, none on target, one of which was that big opportunity, which he took with his left, probably should have took with his right, and it went wide. No successful dribbles, offside twice, and only winning 2 of his 7 duels. So hopefully this is just an off game from Martin Odegaard. He was very critical of himself after the game. He did an interview mentioning that Arsenal need to put the game behind them and just literally get on with it in training the very next day. So hopefully we can see the best of Martin Odegaard once again come the Brighton game. And then last but not least, a concern that we've spoken about before on the channel, not necessarily just directed at Lacazette, but the fact that we don't have that focal point up top. Yes, he's very good at making those numbers up in midfield, dropping deep and allowing wingers in, creating overloads in what could be looked at as a 4-man midfield at times in that diamond. Passing, not the worst in the world, but no key passes, only 1 shot on target, committing 2 fouls and only winning 3 out of 8 duels. He was really marked out of the game, as we looked at in that last slide. He was pretty much in between that double low block that Crystal Palace were operating with. And in my opinion, as mentioned, he should have been flying out to the left and the right, pulling players out of position, creating overloads on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. But it's a learning curve. So those were 3 players that I wanted to talk about. Other players that I've seen criticised on social media among other platforms. Gabriel, for example. Saka not being involved in the game. Emile Smith-Rowe, which I think might be down to more match fitness. I can't remember the last time Smith-Rowe played a 90 minutes for Arsenal, with Gabriel playing the majority of games recently. But we have to put this result behind us and move into the next one. And to finish up, we've got a number of shout outs. Thank you all very much for commenting on the preview video or the preview post over on Twitter. So to shout out a few people, we've got Keith from Mostly Arsenal. Go check out his YouTube channel. We've got Judge. We've got History and Footy Lover. We've got Tum Kunde. I really do apologise if I've mispronounced your name. We've got Daniel Knight, Georgina Triggs, Tim. We've got Prashit and Akesh as well. The last two did predict Palace wins. Unfortunately, they were right. I'm not too sure if they are Arsenal fans or not. I would suggest not so much, but thank you very much either way for getting involved. And unfortunately for the rest of us, me included, we all did predict an Arsenal win and we all did get it wrong. But thank you all for getting involved anyway. Much, much appreciated. But that is going to about wrap things up for today's video. Not the result that we wanted, but always nice to break it down to see what we can do better, where things went wrong, and what we can do moving forwards. Do drop a like on the video if you have enjoyed, and I will next be back for a preview video, Brighton versus Arsenal. We need to bounce back with a win straight away. Subscribe if you're new around here, as it massively helps me out. But I'm JC, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe and take care.